This story is about a human student who starts dancing at an alien academy, only for the aliens to think he's malfunctioning. The Galactic Academy of Interstellar Exchange prided itself on being the most prestigious institute of higher learning this side of the Cephean Drift. There were students from over 400 species, including a sentient cloud of plasma that had once vaporized the library due to an allergic reaction to paper. But this year, for the first time, the Academy welcomed a student from a previously unrepresented planet, Earth. His name was Travis Cole. 22 Earth years old, average height, slightly unruly brown hair, and a fondness for cheese snacks and what he described as music with soul. He'd been cleared by medical, psychology, diplomacy, and cultural orientation. His assigned dorm mates, one gelatinous and the other feathered, initially mistook him for a sickly primate, but quickly warmed up to his strange jokes and compulsive need to decorate everything with tiny string lights. And for the first few weeks, things went surprisingly well, until the Cafeteria Incident. It was a quiet mid-cycle lunch period. The temperature-controlled domes filtered in a soft amber light that some leafy species preferred. Students sat in silence, enjoying a variety of dietary consistent meals. A trio of Zentarians absorbed nutrients through foot membranes while reciting economic treatises in ultrasonic frequencies. Nearby, a pair of Chlorniks debated the ethics of cloning their own professors. The ambient hum of digestive vacuums filled the air. Travis had chosen a seat by the hydro pond, headphones in, bobbing his head to music that none of the others could hear. He was gnawing on a protein bar made from lab-grown trout. A few nearby students watched him warily, unsure whether the repetitive head nod was some sort of low-level seizure or just human food rejection. Then it happened. Without warning, Travis stood up, pushed his tray aside, and launched into what could only be described as a full-body, high-energy convulsion. Limbs flew, hips jerked, shoulders bounced. He spun in place and thumped the ground with his feet in a chaotic, rhythmic fury. It looked less like movement and more like a systems failure. A Yalari across from him screamed a sound like two quartz plates grinding together. "He's spasming!" cried Relit, a Tharnexian with a long medical tail and a keen sense of panic. "Neuromotor collapse? Toxic ingestion? External parasite override?" gasped Enu, who was trained in 17 types of alien triage but not one human dance form. The table closest to Travis ducked for cover. One unlucky Florg student was accidentally slapped by a flailing elbow and dropped his entire nutrient globe, which exploded into a smell of roasted moss and disappointment. An emergency alert went off. Relit had pressed the orange button embedded in his thorax. It was not lightly used. From 3 sectors away, the campus medical unit roared to life. Biodrones zipped overhead, scanning for toxic particles. Auto syringes deployed from ceiling hatches. One overly enthusiastic Goral technician activated the foam cannon. Travis, unaware of the chaos, was hitting his favorite part of the song. He performed what Earthlings referred to as the worm, flinging himself to the floor and rippling his torso in undulations across the tiles. That's when Torque, a nervous first year from the oceanic planet Drowl, decided to act. With a determined grunt and 6 rubbery limbs, Torque slithered across the cafeteria tiles and leapt onto Travis's chest, initiating what he believed was CPR. Unfortunately, his species had never actually seen human anatomy beyond a diagram with too many labels and a note that simply read, "fragile." He began pumping furiously. Travis wheezed, momentarily winded. "Get the foam," someone yelled. A cannon hissed, and a high-pressure blast of sterile white biofoam engulfed Travis and Torque alike. The foam hardened into a soft containment shell. The cafeteria descended into an awkward silence, broken only by the muffled thumps of a still dancing leg twitching inside the shell. Seconds later, the roof opened with a mechanical groan. A siren whooped once. The containment shell was magnetically locked into a launch capsule and shot skyward with a force that rattled every utensil in the room. The last thing anyone heard before the silence returned was the echoing voice of Travis inside the shell. Wait, what the? He was gone. Back in the cafeteria, a silence lingered. One student, chewing slowly, muttered, "That was the most terrifying failure of internal coherence I've ever seen." Relit checked his medical tablet, antennae trembling. He had an elevated heart rate and sweat production, clearly systemic failure. I followed protocol. It was justified. Anu nodded solemnly, still clutching a sedative. Better safe than spontaneously combusted. Meanwhile, above the campus, the emergency capsule rocketed toward the orbital med station, where a very confused Travis was about to be woken up, scrubbed, and diagnosed by 12 extremely puzzled species. And no one, not a single being in that cafeteria, had even thought to ask one very important question. Why was the human smiling the whole time? Travis regained consciousness, face down in a warm gel that smelled like mint and industrial antiseptic. He tried to move, but found his arms pinned in some kind of soft restraint. His ears rang faintly, and the room pulsed with low-frequency chimes, as if someone had designed a hospital with ambiance in mind. Above him, a rectangular ceiling display showed unfamiliar glyphs that kept changing color. A floating device hovered nearby, making quiet clicking sounds. Something pressed gently against his back, taking a scan. The last thing he remembered was hitting a solid worm move on the cafeteria floor, and then a sudden explosion of pressure and whiteness. His mouth felt full of cotton. What happened? From the side of the room, a tall insectoid figure leaned into view, a medical uniform cinched awkwardly over its thorax. It held a chart in one claw and a translator sphere in the other. "You are safe. Please do not thrash." "I wasn't thrashing, I was dancing," Travis croaked, lifting his head enough to see the padded walls of the room and the word Quarantine Sector 4 flashing on a display. The insectoid Dr. Hevlix glanced at the chart and made a whistling noise that passed for concern. "According to 6 eyewitnesses and 1 cafeteria drone, you entered what appeared to be an aggressive physical seizure followed by spinal undulation. There was limb flailing, convulsions, sustained vocal emissions, attempted ground bonding." "I was listening to James Brown," Travis said, bewildered. "I didn't have my headphones plugged into the translator. No one else could hear it." Hevlix paused, tilting its head. "You were mimicking mating calls." "No, I was dancing, for fun." The room grew very quiet. Another medical assistant, a quadrupedal creature with rotating eyes, jotted something down furiously. "We sterilized you," Hevlix said after a moment. "Sprayed high-pressure disinfectant foam. You may experience dryness of skin, temporary blindness, or mild hairlessness." Travis blinked. "You shot me with foam and launched me into orbit." "It was a protocol response. You demonstrated every classic sign of biocollapse." Travis groaned, testing his joints. His shoulder throbbed from where Torque had attempted CPR using what felt like hydraulic presses. His ribs hurt, his pride a little more. "How long have I been here?" 13 standard hours. Your clothing was incinerated. We could not identify a function for your chest strap." "That's my fanny pack." It did not contain a fan. Travis dropped his head back to the pillow. Back on the surface, the cafeteria had become a war zone of rumor and misinterpretation. One student claimed Travis had been infected with a neural parasite that made him lose control of his body. Another insisted it was an emotional eruption caused by isolation and lactose withdrawal. A group of anthropology majors were dissecting the event frame by frame, debating whether the erratic movement was a cry for help or an obscure Earth courtship display. Torque, the one who'd attempted CPR, had taken it especially hard. He sat motionless in the dorm's biothermal corner, his tentacles wrapped around himself. "I compressed his vital cavity," he whispered, 3 times. "He's alive," Anu said. "No bones snapped. It could have been worse." "He said a word to me, right before the foam hit." Anu leaned forward. "What word?" And it was funky. In the days that followed, Travis remained under observation. Specialists were flown in. A diplomatic envoy from the Cultural Miscommunication Council requested an interview. A sample of his music was played in a sealed chamber to assess potential neurological hazards. 2 technicians danced involuntarily before requesting copies. Eventually, the Academy's chancellor issued a formal statement acknowledging that the event had been an unintentional interspecies cultural collision. When Travis was finally cleared to leave medical, he stepped out into the corridor wearing a borrowed jumpsuit 2 sizes too large, a bandage on his left shoulder, and a lanyard that read, "Biohazard Class Y Caution, Unpredictable Musculature." Hevlix escorted him to the exit. "I recommend against abrupt rhythmic movements in communal spaces," the doctor said. "Duly noted. And please avoid horizontal locomotion unless in sleep mode." "I wasn't crawling. That was the worm. It's a move." "Fascinating." Outside the station, a hover car waited. Relit, looking equal parts guilty and fascinated, was in the driver's seat. "I'm sorry," he said as Travis climbed in. "We thought you were dying." "I thought I was dying, but just from embarrassment." There was an awkward pause. Then Relit cleared his throat. "What exactly is dancing?" Travis looked out the window as the vehicle dipped into the atmosphere, heading back toward the Academy dome. "It's hard to explain. Sometimes it's celebration, sometimes it's expression, sometimes it's just what your body does when the music feels too good to sit still." Relit considered this. "So, no external control, no medical emergency?" "Nope. But it involves flailing and grunting. And spinal articulation, deliberately." "Yeah, it's a thing." The hover car bumped slightly as it entered the parking grid. Relit tapped his lower hands nervously on the controls. "Would you be willing to demonstrate again?" Travis raised an eyebrow. "You want me to dance, voluntarily, in front of you, for science?" Travis chuckled. "Maybe, after I ice my ribs, and explain what a fanny pack is." Inside the dorm, someone had painted a mural of the foam cannon mid-blast. The caption read, "Human meltdown, never forget." Travis stood there taking it in. He had survived the worst misunderstanding in Galactic Academy history. And the weird part was, he kinda wanted to do it again. Travis took the next 3 days to rest. His shoulder was bruised from Torque's CPR attempts, and he'd strained something in his back doing a dance move that was not, in hindsight, meant for smooth tile flooring. The Academy Medical Wing had issued him a mobility waiver and a personal temperature-regulating gel vest in case spontaneous writhing resumed. Most of the student body kept their distance. The Florgs watched him through reflective membranes with the same intensity they usually reserved for flame. One Gelvari even dropped a tray just from seeing him stretch his arms. Rumor had turned him into an unpredictable event, like a solar flare but with elbows. On the 4th day, someone slid a note under his door. It was printed on thick, scaly parchment and read, "Requesting private observation of Earth movement behavior. For research, snacks provided. Professor Dweln, Department of Cognitive Mimicry." Travis figured if he was already infamous, he might as well lean in. He pocketed 2 painkillers, slung his gel vest over one shoulder, and headed for the East Observatory. The research session turned out to be less academic and more participatory. Professor Dweln was a 6-eyed arthropod who wore 3 pairs of glasses stacked over each other and had converted his lecture room into what could only be described as a dance lab. There were lights. There was a music translator calibrated to replicate Earth bass frequencies. A sign on the wall read, "Emotionally Appropriate Wiggle Zone." A half-dozen students stood awkwardly in a circle, each with a notepad. Travis recognized Relit and, surprisingly, Torque, whose tentacles curled slightly at the sight of him. "I thought I'd observe," Torque said shyly, "from a safe distance." Well napped a projector. "Mr. Cole, would you demonstrate your locomotion? Slowly at first, we will mirror your movements. For science." Travis hesitated. "Just to be clear, no one's going to foam me again?" "Foam cannons have been decommissioned," Dweln assured him. "Also, we have added padding to all walls." He sighed and stepped into the center. "All right, this one's simple. It's called the 2-step. You just shift side to side, like this." He moved. Gently, nothing wild, no ground-rippling worm move. just a simple sway, a slight knee bounce. The students mimicked him, albeit poorly. The Galvari wobbled, the winged Aranthe tried flapping in rhythm and knocked over a light fixture. Torque, to his credit, tried using suction pads to match Travis's foot taps. But something strange happened. They started to enjoy it. A low chirping sound broke out among them, the Aranthia equivalent of laughter. Dwelln scribbled frantically, mumbling something about kinesthetic empathy and limbic contagion. Relit bobbed too quickly and had to steady himself with a wall-mounted nutrient hose. By the end of the hour, the group was sweating or secreting or steaming, depending on anatomy. Travis smiled. "So we good now? Not a health threat?" Dwelln nodded, breathless. "You are a revelation, a moving, gyrating conundrum. I wish to record you. You want to film me? For the university's culture archives. And, if you consent, for the mandatory health and safety training." Travis groaned. "Sure, as long as there's no foam." News of the unofficial dance session spread quickly. Within 2 rotations, the Academy Cultural Office released an official memorandum titled Understanding Earth's Voluntary Muscle Discharges, a primer on dance. The document included diagrams of Travis's movements, still shots of his footwork, and a strongly worded disclaimer. Dancing is not a sign of imminent collapse. What no one expected was the impact it had outside the academy. An envoy from the neighboring Vuntri colony requested a visit, citing cultural assimilation research. They brought their delegation into the cafeteria, now famously labeled Ground Zero, Funk Incident, and watched as Travis led a dozen alien students in a coordinated shuffle. The ambassador, a high-ranking Vuntri with 5 necks, broke into spontaneous limb tapping. His aides rushed to stop him, fearing convulsion. Travis intervened. No, let him go. That's dancing." The ambassador later described it as the most liberating loss of skeletal discipline I have ever experienced. From there, it snowballed. The medical faculty requested a demonstration on stress reduction. The engineering department asked him to test motion sensors using interpretive moves. The intergalactic cafeteria board changed floor materials to non-slip variants. The foam cannon was reclassified as a last resort only response tool. One day, Travis walked into his dorm to find a package on his bed. Inside was a certificate, printed in 7 languages, and an embroidered sash that read Cross-Cultural Incident Resolution Specialist, Honorary. He sat down, stunned. Torque peeked in. "Are you okay?" "Yeah, just thinking. I danced once, that's it. I didn't mean to start a movement." Torque shrugged, an odd sight with tentacles. "We needed a new movement. Yours was just the first that didn't cause panic after 20 seconds. Later that evening, as stars blinked over the domed sky and cafeteria lights dimmed for late rotation, Travis walked past the mural of himself mid-foam blast. Someone had updated the caption. It now read, "He was just dancing." And below that, scrolled in tiny script, "Thank you." A full moon rose over the artificial horizon of the Galactic Academy, not because this sector had a moon, but because some nostalgic Earth engineer had programmed the environmental system to cycle lunar simulations for the few humans on campus. Travis liked that. He liked a lot of things now, including, surprisingly, being on camera. The Interstellar Bureau of Cultural Integration had contacted him earlier that week. They wanted him to star in a new interspecies training video, recognizing human behavior, dance and non-emergency spasms. It sounded ridiculous. It also sounded like him. He'd agreed on the condition that the foam cannon remain retired, for good. The day of filming, Travis stood in the now-cleared lecture hall dressed in a newly tailored academy jumpsuit. He had recovered fully, although his left shoulder still ached when he sneezed too hard. His medical report had been amended several times to include things like stress-induced gyration syndrome and culturally sanctioned kinetic self-expression. Relit was beside him, holding a clipboard. Torque sat in the front row, surrounded by a group of junior medical students ready to take notes. Professor Dwelln had set up multiple holocameras and added mood lighting. Ready? Dwelln asked, adjusting his many glasses. As I'll ever be, Travis said, cracking his neck. He took a deep breath and nodded toward the sound technician, who had imported the song directly from Earth's historical music archive. A moment later, the unmistakable bass line of Super Freak blasted through the speakers. Travis moved. Not wildly, not dangerously, but with rhythm, with intention. His feet slid, his arms dipped, his chest bounced in time. The music seemed to loosen the tension in the room. Students began nodding along. One of the Galvari mimicked a shoulder roll. Even the rigid Tharnexian security officer tapped a toe. Midway through the dance, Dwelln whispered into his mic, "Note how no foam has been deployed. This is progress." When the song ended, the room broke into polite applause, some of it hesitant, some genuine. Travis grinned and bowed, only slightly winded. He waved to the students. And that, folks, is how humans celebrate, express, or just deal with a weird day. One tentacle lifted. "What if you don't hear the music?" "You don't need to," Travis said. "If it looks like joy and no one's bleeding, odds are it's fine." That night, the video went live, then viral. Within days, dozens of colonies had updated their human threat classification charts. Erratic limb movement was downgraded from biocollapse level 2 to cultural display non-combative. A few species even tried dancing themselves. It went poorly for the rigid-shelled Blarnites, who lost a few panels in the process, but they were enthusiastic. The cafeteria reopened its performance corner, renamed the Groove Quadrant. Travis was asked to DJ. He politely declined, citing PTSD from the foam blast. But he did help pick out the playlist. Torque, once traumatized by his own medical overreaction, became the Academy's first student certified in human physiological rhythmology. He gave seminars titled "Don't Tackle the Funk, A Guide to Human Dance Patterns." Relit, now something of a cultural liaison, admitted one night that he had memorized most of Travis's moves and practiced them privately in the holodeck. One evening, as Travis walked past the hydropond where it all started, he noticed something new, a statue. It was modest, metal, slightly abstract, a human figure mid-dance, limbs frozen in joyful chaos. At the base, a plaque read, "In honor of Travis Cole, for reminding us that not every strange motion is a cry for help, sometimes it's just dancing." He stood there a while, watching the shimmer of reflected light ripple off the water. He didn't need to be remembered, but it was nice. He headed back to his dorm, humming, the bass line still in his bones. And when he thought no one was watching, he busted out a quick two-step under the stars. Just once. For the groove, for the memory.